which means it's election day, and voters in North Carolina, Ohio, and Indiana are headed to the polls right now. The race to watch is in North Carolina, where 8 candidates are vying for the chance to take on Democratic Senator Kay Hagan in November. But it's the fight between the 3 frontrunners that's turning this race into the latest battle in the Civil War between the Tea Party and the Republican Party establishment. GOP stalwarts are backing North Carolina State House Speaker Thom Tillis, who was endorsed by Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney, and you can't get more establishment than that. Tea Party groups, meanwhile, are splitting their loyalty between 2 other candidates. There's physician Greg Brannon, who got a bit of a last-minute campaign bump from Senator Rand Paul yesterday.
When I show up at Tea Party events, I see a lot of people who are working class, blue-collar workers. I see people of every different race and ethnic group, much more so than I do in the Republican Party.
And there's Baptist Minister Mark Harris, who has the backing of former Arkansas governor and fellow evangelical Mike Huckabee. Now, today's election is the first for North Carolina voters under the state's new voting law. And although the controversial voter ID provision of the law will not go into effect until 2016, voting laws could also be on the minds of those voters today. Meanwhile, Ohio voters could soon have less time to cast their ballots after Republican Governor John Kasich signed a law which cuts early voting days and reduces registration days. When the governor signed the law in February, the Cleveland Plain Dealers website, the Cleveland Plain Dealers editorial board, called it a breathtaking bid to suppress voting. And joining me now, Ohio Democratic State Senator Nina Turner. She's running unopposed for the Democratic nomination for Ohio Secretary of State in today's primary. But she's also been an outspoken critic of Ohio's voter ID laws and laws restricting early voting. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joy.
All right, so Senator Turner, let's just start with Ohio's voting restrictions. These are the laws, the things that have already been signed in by the current governor. In your view, will those voting restrictions, the ones, whatever's in place today, impact voting today in Ohio?
Oh, absolutely, Joy, and we've already started to see evidence of that. In 2010, in Cuyahoga County, for example, about 230,000 voters voted pre-primary. 60% of those voters were absentee ballots. In the absentee ballot opportunities that we've had in 2014, less than half had come in by last Saturday, which was the last day to early vote. So we're definitely seeing the impacts of not only the cuts to Golden Week, but the cuts to mailing out unsolicited absentee ballots, of which the General Assembly changed that at the behest of the current Secretary of State. So they are trying to suppress the vote every chance that they get because they don't have better ideas. And it really is wrong for our democracy, Joy, because voters need to come out and vote and let their voices be heard, and nobody should stand in the way of that just because they don't believe that they have better ideas. It is wrong.
And you know what? Obviously, the real action takes place in November in terms of these particular laws, although they are in place now. Last week, the ACLU actually filed a lawsuit in federal court to try to block the new restrictions on early voting, what you call Golden Week, meaning the week right before the election, that those laws are going to take effect. And I want to read you what the spokesman for Secretary of State John Husted said about that lawsuit today. He said, quote, "The fact is, it's easy to vote in Ohio, and the plaintiffs should be joining Secretary Husted in making sure all voters know their voting options rather than trying to scare them into believing it's hard. That's the real voter suppression." So A, is it easy to vote in Ohio, State Senator Turner, and B, is it actually voter suppression to argue that it's not easy to vote in Ohio?
I mean, Joy, they never let the truth get in the way of a good story. They certainly have a good story. You know, the cuts to early voting through the legislature, all the bills that have passed, and then the directive that the current Secretary of State put out to take away evening hours to vote so that hardworking men and women will not have access to the ballot box, to take away Saturdays and to take away or to limit Saturdays, and then no Sundays, Joy, no souls to the polls. So what Ohioans had enjoyed post-2004, now the GOP, they're taking it away. So they're absolutely trying to suppress the vote of poor voters, African American, Latino, other voters of color, and elderly voters. And again, this does not make any kind of sense because none of the laws that they have passed, nor the directive that the Secretary of State put out to try to limit voting opportunities, there is no rationale for this other than trying to choke out the democracy. So it is laughable, the response of the Secretary of State's office. office.
And so you talked a little bit about, sort of the evening hours being cut. And you've done sort of even demonstrations, with Ed Schultz right here on MSNBC, of just how long it takes to actually get from one polling place to another with the reduction in the actual physical locations to vote. I want to show you what one of our reporters at our NBC affiliate in Columbus, and they talked about sort of how the cuts to early voting can be a hardship for people who actually don't have cars. So take a look.
Absolutely.
I put my feet to the pavement and walk 1.7 miles to the bus stop. After a little waiting, it's time to hop on my COTA bus. I'm taking the number 1 all the way downtown. 55 stops later, we're closing in on the Board of Elections. After a short walk, we've reached our destination. 1 hour, 26 minutes later, it's time to join other voters and cast a ballot.
And Senator Turner, what is the official explanation as to why voters are being made to essentially take an hour and a half by bus to get to their polling place rather than locate them in people's communities?
They don't have a good excuse, Joy. I mean, none of the actions that have been taken by the GOP in this state make any sense whatsoever. And to do that knowing that lots of folks in the state of Ohio are public transportation dependent. And the laws are not just you vote only if you have a car. The democracy should be open to all folks. So they have no rationale other than if they can't beat them, they will cheat them. And they're doing everything from the redistricting moves that they did to laws that are being passed. And as you may recall, in 2012, the president's campaign, along with the Ohio Democratic Party, had to sue this current Secretary of State just to get back the last 3 days of early voting. We have lawsuits pending right now, and it's unfortunate that voting rights advocates have to use litigation to try to secure access to the ballot box for all people. Ohioans deserve better, and this nation deserves better in that space. And I believe that there are some parallels between 2012 and 2014 as we continue to fight for democracy and access to the ballot box for all people.
And we're short on time, but just very quickly, State Senator, do you think people are outraged enough about this? Because you have poll after poll showing that Democrats are less excited about voting in 2014, that it is Republicans who are more excited, that Republicans are poised to just broadly take over state and federal offices across the country in November. Are Democrats getting exercised enough about the issue of voting access?
People are starting to heat up, Joy. People understand that one woman, one man, one vote, that voting is the great equalizer. It may take them a little time, but they are paying great attention to this. I've traveled all over the state of Ohio from the north to the south, and people are fired up and more than ready to go, and you're going to see that in the general election.
All right, Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, and up next.